will give you any kind of financial aid or give you a financial packet without having that FAFSA filled out, okay? And so, one of the reasons the state of Texas is now requiring it is there's millions, billions of dollars that go unclaimed, and we just, if they feel that students kind of realize how much money they can possibly get for college may seem more like an option for them. It's because a lot of times the money is what deters kids from possibly attending college. So, we have Jason Peacock. He is one of the admissions counselors for UNT, here to talk to you a little bit about just the college application process, but it's mainly going to be about filling out the FAFSA and why it's so important. And then after tonight, we will have some actual workshops through the month of October. We're going to have, on Wednesdays, we'll have 2 that you can come in the mornings, and then we'll have 2 Wednesdays where you'll have come in the afternoon. And UNT has a Go Center. Some of our students from UNT are here. They will be here, and they are FAFSA experts. And so they would sit down with you and help you through the process. If any of the times that we have set up does not work for you, the Go Center actually has virtual meetings where you can set up a virtual time, or you can actually go up to UNT and sit down and work with them there as well. So next week, look for some publications from the school on when some of those workshops will be, okay? I know some of you have already done the sign-in sheet, but I'm going to go ahead and start it, and if you signed it, if you'll just pass it along so we can make sure we have everybody's attendance. So, I'll pass it over to you. You're welcome.
Well, good evening. I'm not a financial aid officer. I want to make that very clear to start off with. So my goal here is today hopefully to explain some of the basic concepts of financial aid and hopefully give you some resources and ideas that's going to make the process a little less intimidating, a little more successful on your end. I'm not really going to talk too much about the application process, but there are a few things that I think roll into financial aid and financial aid eligibility that I did want to cover. Choosing the right college, I've actually taped a video that should be posted soon that covers a lot of the questions that I think are very important for students to ask as they're going through the college search process. So certainly I encourage seniors to keep an eye on that to help them determine how to choose the right college. Because I think too often students get caught up in trying to find the best college. Yeah, that's not a good idea. The goal is not about getting into college. The goal is about getting out of college. And choosing the right one early in the process will hopefully increase that likelihood. But talk about college researches, the importance of visiting campus, the importance of scheduling academic meetings with representatives at the schools you're attending, in addition to the admissions officers there. And then to know important opening dates and application dates for each university that the student is applying to. I went ahead and put a couple of the important dates with regards to UNT to give you an idea of what dates you might need to find out about institutions your students are applying to. So, admissions, we open July 1. Our priority date is March 1st for admissions consideration. Scholarships opens October 1. March 1 is their deadline. But if a student waits to apply until March 1, it's going to be too late for scholarship consideration, at least at North Texas. So also realize that dates don't always correspond to other dates with regards to deadlines. Financial aid in Texas, the priority financial aid deadline for virtually every public institution is January 15th. So students, aid is important. At least for my university, students need to be admitted to UNT and have all financial aid documentation submitted. Really, I recommend no later than Christmas. Because if you submit documentation over Christmas holidays, we're rolling into spring semester when we return. We may not work documentation that came in over the spring term before January 15th hits. Additional departmental applications or auditions. Find out if there's a separate housing application. Find out what suggestions schools may have with regards to submitting housing for UNT. I recommend it's better to have something and not need it than need it and not have it. So students, once they don't even need to be admitted, they can secure housing in North Texas, but then decline it by the decision date, and it's just a small application fee that would be charged. So And then if there's an honors college application for the institution. One of the best recommendations I have for students is never ask when a deadline is. Ask when applications open, because being proactive will absolutely assist students in the awarding a process of scholarships, financial aid, and in some instances even admissions. So be proactive, do not await deadlines to pass. A few common admissions items: application fee or fee waiver if applicable, high school transcripts. A lot of schools that you may see, particularly within Texas, once the student applies and submits the application fee, only the student reported academic record may be needed. And what that is simply if the student has an unofficial transcript from their high school, they can basically transcribe their grades from 9th, 10th, 11th grade into this system, which will help the school calculate GPA automatically. And I know UNT is using that GPA calculation for immediate admissions determination. Now, we'll need to get a final high school transcript just to validate information, but based solely upon what students are inputting into the system, I think a lot of schools are making direct admissions processes because we don't have the processors to do that data entry efficiently and quickly. So you're probably saving at least a month to 6 weeks for UNT if students do that academic record submission. Test scores: these schools are test optional or test blind. Right now UNT is test blind for SAT for scholarship purposes and test optional for admissions. But some of the other items that may be required for admissions. The main types of applications students will find: the coalition, the common, the applied Texas, as well as institutional applications. And in many instances, applications need to occur before financial aid is able to be evaluated. I thought I hid these. Hold on a second. I guess I did. Hold on a second. Let me jump through to the financial aid portion. There we go. So, this evening, these are a few of the areas that I hope to discuss to hopefully provide some definitions to some of these things, and give you an idea of how financial aid is considered and awarded as part of the process. So cover what financial aid is, what cost of attendance is and why it's important, expected family contribution, financial need, various types of categories and types of financial aid, Fafsa and PASFA, and the differences between those two applications, and who uses what, as well as the concept of special circumstances for financial aid consideration. So financial aid consists of funds, scholarships, grants, loans, work-study programs provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. One thing I think it is important for students and parents to realize: a lot of times students will say, yeah, I got my financial aid and I got a lot of loans, I want more grants. Or I want more financial aid, all I got was loans. Loans are part of financial aid. They're not necessarily the best resource that's available, but I know, at least for my institution and a lot of other institutions, we always try to award free money first based upon availability. So we'll talk about that process in a moment, but loans are part of financial aid, and almost inevitably they will play some component in the financial aid process to help pay for colleges. Just a common occurrence regardless of what schools students tend to be going to now. So cost of attendance, are you all familiar with the term cost of attendance? So this is basically the big sticker price on colleges. It consists of more than just tuition and fees. It includes all room and board costs, books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses. Every school will have a cost of attendance that they will use to determine financial aid of eligibility. I think something students should ask for is the difference between what direct costs and indirect costs are for the institution. So if a student is living on campus like they would at UNT freshman year, the direct cost would be about $24,000 a year. About $13,000, $13,500 for tuition and fees, about $10,000 for room and board. But those would be direct costs because you're paying those directly to the university. many students may live at home if they live in Argyle. There is a commuter exemption. And in that instance, there is still a cost of attendance associated with room and board. It's a little bit different than what it is living at home, but that's still factored into the cost of attendance, even if a student is living at home and doesn't have a direct cost. Or if they're living in an apartment and they have to pay the landlord, being an indirect cost. But cost of attendance varies widely from college to college. The important component for financial aid is expected family contribution. So we're going to talk about the FAFSA, but in essence, when you submit your when you submit your tax information through the FAFSA instrument, that goes to Uncle Sam. They crunch the information from the FAFSA and they create something called a student aid report. It's a 2-page report, front and back, with a lot of the information that you submitted summarized. But on that student aid report, there's an expected family contribution, an estimated family contribution. So that's how much Uncle Sam anticipates the family to pay towards the college educational expenses over the year. Now, in many instances, that estimated expected cost of expected family contribution is going to exceed what is readily available, but there are some resources to help cover those costs if necessary. So regardless of what your EFC, it stays the same in all colleges. This is a determination made by the federal government. There is a parent contribution and a student contribution. Very often, if students are expected to provide a larger percentage of their income than the parents are, so having a student job isn't necessarily a good thing for college sometimes when it comes to aid eligibility. Calculated using the data form from the federal application and the federal formula, and we'll talk about the FAFSA and the ability to electronically upload your tax information directly into the system, which financial aid offices generally recommend, because that process will usually not require verification for financial aid purposes. Verification is a process that catches about 1 in 3 financial aid applicants annually, and generally it's you have to submit your tax documents to the financial aid office so they can verify your FAFSA submission to the federal government. But that can delay release of the award, and again, like we said, January 15th is that priority date. So if you haven't been fully finished that verification process until after that date, you may lose out on some funding options. So financial need, that's basically what the university will try to find for the student to help offset the costs. Simple equation, cost of attendance minus that EFC determines the amount of aid that's necessary for the student. And as we said, EFC remains constant at schools. The aid amount will vary. So the more expensive a school is, the more an aid that a student may become eligible for. The less expensive a school is, it's possible they may lose access to some grants, some of the free money programs, because the cost of attendance is so low, they don't hit eligibility requirements. Now, what I would say, if we look at these 3 models, 1, 2, and 3, see, anybody, students considering applying or going to Notre Dame? Okay, we'll pick on Notre Dame for a minute. Anybody know what the cost of attendance is for Notre Dame this year?
75.
Very close, 73.5. So how long is college?
4 years.
So it's a nice house in the area. Well, maybe a few years ago. So let's say that number 1 is a private school, higher cost. 2 is, let's say, a state school. 3 is a community college. EFC is standard at all 3 institutions. The amount of need will vary upon institution. Now, it may be possible that the private school has additional institutional funding mechanisms that may be able to help offset more in loans. So it is possible, even though this is more expensive, you have access to more aid, it might be a better overall option when you look at the final awards from all institutions. But this is why I think it's incredibly important for students. Don't do what I did my senior year in high school. I suicided at college. It was the only college I applied to. Luckily, I got in. But it is imperative, I think, students have 3 to 5 offers. to really look at the financial implications of what each institution is offering. Generally, students will have this information coming back in to them, usually in March, April timeframe in most instances. And so they have at least a month. May 1st is usually the decision deadline. I know we've had some extensions because of COVID the last couple of years. But May 1st is usually the decision deadline by which time a student has to accept a formal award. But that should provide students ample amount of time to really judge which school is going to be the best choice and which financial aid package makes the most sense long term. So various types of aid. So the types of financial aid: free aid, gift aid, scholarships and grants. Scholarships are, depending upon the institution, some may be need-based, some may be merit-based only. So again, doing a little research with the institutions the students are applying to find out what's available is important. Grants are generally need-based aid opportunities. So these are free money, at least the way UNT awards. When we determine a student's financial need, we will automatically award as much free money as we have, grants and scholarship options first against that financial need. Once we run out of free money, and the reason why January 15th is important is for a lot of state and institutional funding mechanisms, we have a bucket of money, and we run out of that money annually. And what we've kind of determined is, if a student applies after January 15th for financial aid, we really don't have any of that money left for institutional or state funding. So that's why we put that date to maximize consideration for those funding mechanisms. Federal financial aid, if you're eligible for it, you're going to have access to that. Pell Grant, we'll talk about Pell Grant in a little bit, but the Pell Grant, if you're eligible for it, you're going to get it. Self-help aid, these are loans. So to help offset any financial need which is not covered by free aid, students may have access to direct or indirect, I think it's on the next page. Supplemental, subsidized or unsubsidized loans. So these are some of the federal programs that are available. Pell Grant, maximum award of $64.95, can be higher if the student is doing it as a year-round student, but minimum award is $650 for eligibility if a student is need-based eligible. FSEOG grants based on availability, anywhere from $100 to $4,000 a year. Teach grants, these are grants where a student commits to teaching in a Title IX school for a certain period of time. Any loans, those specific loans that are provided will revert to grants immediately. Federal work study, so you guys are work study, aren't you?
Yeah, we are work study.
Yeah. So work study is basically, it is some of that self-help aid where the federal government says the student has access to this lump sum of money, up to $2,500 a year, is that it?
$2,500 per semester.
Per semester, yeah. $2,500 per semester. So basically what happens is if a student receives college work study, it's their responsibility to find a work study job on campus once they get there, and that payment is usually intended to pay off when we're looking at the cost of attendance, the personal expenses. This is not money which is given to the student at the beginning of the semester to use against tuition, room and board, things like that, but it's intended to be used for those personal expenses, transportation expenses, which are part of cost of attendance, which arise over the duration of their study. Now, I will also say, if a student is not college work study eligible, they may not have access to certain jobs on campus because they are reserved for college work study students. But I know at my university and other universities, there are other work study positions available that do not require the college work study funding component of financial aid.
So like, when you're gonna apply for Fafsa, there's like an option for you to choose if you like to be a work study. So you always like put yes, and then so then like that will like help them to see like if you're eligible or not. So you have to be eligible in order to be a work study. Otherwise, you just cannot apply as a work study program where you are not eligible, and they haven't like verified or anything like that. So you have to apply for that.
But you'll have a lot more opportunities if you are college work study because then you could
There's more
apply for
job
that.
options for work study than part-time or like in general.
But getting work study doesn't guarantee work study positions are available on campus either. So do be aware of that.
What are some reasons you would not be eligible?
It's need-based.
Oh,
So if the student doesn't show requisite need, then they wouldn't provide that funding source for them. But they can still get a job on campus. Let's see, so SUD, teach grant, work study, and then the direct loans, so subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans, need-based. Basically, Uncle Sam pays the interest rate while the student is in school. So they are better than unsubsidized loans. What I sometimes recommend for students that do receive or do accept those unsubsidized loans, try and pay off at least the interest accrual while you're still in school, just so you can minimize that interest accrual over time. Some of the numbers that we have, this year, 3.73 interest rate. I think that's up almost a full point over last year. So we are seeing these rates start to increase a little bit. For the direct student loans, either subsidized or unsubsidized, maximum amount $5,500 per year, and it does increase by $1,000 through the junior year for students to access. Plus loans are parent loans, which can be taken out to cover up to the full cost of attendance. And this is where if an EFC is a little bit outside of what is possible for the family, plus loans can come in and help cover that, but it is in the name of the parent because it's applied usually to that expected family contribution. Any questions about this? A plus, guys. So state aid programs, Texas Educational Opportunity Grant, amount depends upon the enrollment of the university. The TEASG grant, up to $50.39 a semester, again, need-based award. And then tuition equalization grant for students that go to private schools. So this is one of those, the state grants which can help bring private schools tuition a little bit more close to what public schools are able to extend. But again, these run out of funding, so the sooner the student is considered and awarded, the better. So I wanted to talk about the Fsa Id. So this is the ID that every parent must have with regards to applying for financial aid eligibility, as well as the applicant themselves. So it allows access to the US DOE websites, may be used by students and parents, and if you have, if you went to school in the last 10 years, if your child has an older sibling that may have gone to school recently, you may have already generated this Fsa Id previously. So do be aware. But online, fsaid.ed.gov, and I believe you have a handout which covers a little bit more of this process. So definitely we want to get this done before the application, the financial aid application opens in October.
Question. Yeah, I had a question, sorry. Here it's saying to do the ID, it says social security number and all that. Are we putting it under our child's social security number and they're gonna be the ones, or is it gonna be under our social security number and we're the ones that are the owners?
So your student is the one that is applying for aid, yet they will require your information for eligibility.
So the ID is gonna be under my social security number, my husband's, not my.
It will be under, you will have your own Fsa Id, and I believe it doesn't require social.
There will be like two Fsa ID, one for the student, one for like either one of the parent.
Okay, so,
Two Fsa ID.
okay, so when we do our, just to clarify then, so I'm actually gonna be filling out this twice, this application, correct, under two different IDs?
Yes.
One for you, one for you.
So, no. It's gonna be, so for you, just one. For like each student, like, you have to like create that separate account for the kid, but yours is gonna be the same. So like, at the end of the application, you have to like, both the parents and the student have to like sign the form at the end of the application. That's why they want you to create two Fsa ID, one for you, one for your.
But it's gonna be the same, just one thing of paperwork.
Just one thing, but like, just to sign the official form, you just have to have two Fsa
Okay,
ID.
oh, okay.
Yes.
Any other questions about that? Yeah.
I have a question about, you said January 15th is generally the
For state schools
Okay, for state schools.
in
Okay.
Texas.
I guess, So I know a lot of the universities that my child is looking into, they won't even give acceptance until like February 1st. So do we apply for this beforehand, or do you need to know the institution?
Well, so you can submit up to 10 student aid reports to various schools. My recommendation is the sooner you get it to them, the better.
Okay.
But every school has their own awarding process, their own admissions process. At my university, we're pushing out admissions as soon as we make the determinations. Financial aid waits and usually starts processing and awarding sometime in December, and then continues on as long as they have applications. But every school is going to be a little bit different, so certainly getting to know and working with the admissions officer for the schools you're considering and finding out what makes the most sense for those institutions is going to be the key.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Those deadlines are for fall semester. How about if somebody want to join early in spring? Do you have any traditional setup deadline?
So I will say one of the concerns I have with students starting in the spring term is those, our funding for financial aid is generally granted on an annual basis. So when we start awarding financial aid for the 21-22 academic year, we run out of a lot of those provisional funds before we finish awarding all the students starting in the fall semester. That does sometimes mean spring semester students, while they may be eligible for some state and institutional funding options, they may not exist anymore because they've already been exhausted for the year. So there can be some impact, but December 1 is the priority financial aid submission date for spring term students. December 1.
Yeah, because it opens up on like October 1st, so you recommend students like as soon as it opens up just to apply, because like it's like the funding is like
But the spring application is already open.
it's already open.
The 21-22 application's been open since October of 2020. So you can submit that now, but it's also important to note that for the fall of 2022, you'll need to submit the FAFSA again. Each and every year, you have to submit the FAFSA by the priority date for maximum consideration.
So the ID again, we only need one ID for two parents, for not,
So like you will need one ID for the student, and either parent 1 or parent 2, just one ID for the parent.
Alright.
So you don't need
That
like
parent
two.
can answer everything
That
else, right?
parent can, yeah, that parent can like, because like you'll be adding like both parents like of the income and everything, but for the Fsa ID, either one of the parent can just open it. You don't have to be like different ID for two parents.
Okay.
It's just one for the parents, yeah.
And it's simply so Uncle Sam knows who you are. It's just a link everything.
Yeah. If you have like 2 kids, if you just like under like your account, like you can add both. Okay. That makes sense.
So the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, is what it's commonly referred to as. Most important word in this title is it's the free application.
Yeah.
You should not pay anyone to fill this out. So in addition to the workshops offered by Argyle High School to help you figure this out, there is a nationwide customer service number that you can call to get assistance. You can come to virtually any college campus's financial aid office, and generally they would be able to answer questions, sit you down in a computer lab and help you finish it if you do need help. So there are tons of resources to get it done, so there's no reason not to submit. October 1 is when the financial aid the FAFSA application will open. The TASFA application we'll talk about in a moment as well. But yeah, January 15th, again, for most Texas schools is the priority deadline. But for schools like UT and A&M, I think they have, a December 1 admissions and financial aid deadline, so they're even a little bit earlier. But that January 15th is kind of the applied state deadline. And then, of course, the 22-23 taxes will be based upon 2020 tax data. So, information needed to finish the FAFSA, tax income returns, income information, benefit summaries, what's not necessary, 401k or IRA balances, and not the value of your primary residence, but additional residence can impact aid eligibility.
On the back of that, creating a FAFSA handout or FAFSA ID handout is kind of what you need to have with you when you fill out your application.
And any untaxed income such as child support received. Frequent FAFSA errors, and I'll include some application errors because how you complete your application can impact how the FAFSA is a process. So social security numbers. Social security numbers are often asked on applications. I know a lot of family members and students don't like providing that information on the application, but it does clear a lot of issues that might result. So for UNT at least, we have to match the application with the financial aid by social security number. So if a student doesn't provide us with a social security number on the application, we require the student to fax, yeah, we still do that, fax a copy of the social security card to UNT so we can enter it, because we don't want to accept that information via email. So I would recommend that you do submit that on the secure application website, and I would probably imagine many admissions officers at other schools would encourage you to do the same. Information, divorce, remarried, parental information is important. You're only required to submit the income of one parent, but it would include step-parent with that, right? Yeah, income earned by parents and step-parents. Untaxed income needs to be included, U.S. income tax paid, household size, how many members are in college in the household, real estate and investment net worth, and what assets to include. You can make corrections online at fafsa.gv, but best recommendation, don't make errors. Get it right the first time, you'll thank yourself. What happens after you submit the FAFSA? Some of the application is printed up and it can be provided to you, so you can see all the information, including the expected family contribution that the school will use to determine aid eligibility. Again, the summary is called the Student Aid Report. You can, if you click how to download Student Aid Report, you can find the directions on how to find that once it is done. Like I said, the verification processes is so if you don't automatically connect your tax returns to the data retrieval tool for FAFSA, there is probably a 1 in 3 chance you might get selected for verification, which would require additional documentation to be submitted to verify eligibility for awards. Make sure students know that each school communicates with them. This is incredibly important. My God. So every school, once you apply, generally an email will be sent that will provide access to the computer systems at that institution. It'll generally have a to-do list of what things the student has to turn in order to complete admissions and in order to complete financial aid. So I implore students, when you are applying to schools, please be sure to get the portal login information for that school and any email. Like for our students, we generate their UNT email when they apply. So we will send important correspondence to that email that sometimes students never check. It's not a good combination. So be sure your students are reviewing the portals and reviewing any email addresses which are generated because of that application. Or my recommendation, have everything forwarded to a primary email so they are reviewing everything that they're getting. Every year I'll have students call me and say, yeah, I haven't got my financial aid award. That's because, yeah, we've asked you for the last 4 months if you're going to be a full-time student or part-time student. Without that question, we don't know what to award you. It's been sitting in their portal for months. And because they were late, they lost out on some of those need-based grant programs. Let's see, make sure students communicate with the schools. FERPA, the Federal Educational Rights to Privacy Act. I will mention this momentarily. As parents, you may be somewhat limited in the information that you will receive from colleges. So there are often FERPA waivers that can be submitted that will help. We're a little bit more relaxed at North Texas. Our philosophy is an applicant is not a student. You're on the way to possibly be a student, so the student is not necessarily applicable to FERPA until they are actually enrolled and paying for classes. So if you call me, I'll help you with the application fee. I'll give you recommendations on financial aid, etc. But some schools may be far, far more strict than that. And then watch for the award notifications. The TASFA are for students that are Texas residents but not U.S. citizens or permanent residents of the United States. So undocumented students, but also a wide range of visa holders in Texas are eligible to be in-state for tuition purposes, but they cannot receive federal financial aid. They do have access to those state programs. So they do have to verify they are Texas residents. The TASFA is filled out, is also usually available in October. We try to match the October 1 deadline, but I know last year they were a little bit late. And there is the new online application for TASFA at collegeforalltexans.org. That collegeforalltexans.org is actually the Higher Education Coordinating Board's website for Texas. So these will include a ton of waiver programs for tuition and fees, scholarship opportunities for Texas schools. So can be a good resource for general information about Texas colleges. And then some institutions offer the TASFA online. UNT is one of those. So special circumstances, as mentioned previously, your income in 2020 is the income that's being used for students starting fall of 2022. And so we know what happened in fall of 2020, or in 2020, and incomes that might be on that 2020 income may not really relate to what the current income is now. FAFSA isn't built to take into consideration current financial standing. It's looking at a snapshot from 2 years ago. So there is an option called special circumstances, which basically every school may have a slightly different process, but it will allow you to submit information to that school and say, hey, what you're looking at from 2020 is not as accurate today. It can be, if there's information that's not documented on FAFSA that you feel should be considered, a change in employment status, unusual medical expenses, change in marital status. You can send in documentation, there'll be a specific form. But in essence, what will happen is the financial aid office, once they have made the award, will be able to look at the special circumstances and perhaps provide additional funding options. They may be able to extend some more grant programs than loan programs. It's not guaranteed, and I know this year we got hit really hard with special circumstances, so I don't know how much they changed, but it is worth knowing that it is a possibility. That is determined by each individual school, and it is not appealable. So scholarships, I did want to give a couple of words on scholarships. So when we're talking about financial need, when we're talking about that financial need, so the amount of the award that is being given to the student, scholarships goes against financial need, not against expected family contribution. So it is hitting against that need-based component. Now scholarships, there are restrictions to scholarships, so be sure that if a scholarship is awarded, you know how long that scholarship is for. Most scholarships are only for 1 year in many instances. So you need to know that second year, that $4,000 scholarship may need to be replaced with additional loan funding. So take into consideration some of those changes. Will the scholarship only pay the university directly for costs? Or if you've already paid your tuition and fees and everything, would any scholarship funds simply be available to you to withdraw from your student account and use for books or other cost of attendance related components? Do institutions stack awards? So is a student liable to get 3 or 4 or 5 scholarships to help decrease the amount of loans that they might have to take? Or, like UNT, our philosophy, we're a public institution, and we try to spread scholarships as widely as possible. So it is uncommon for students to get multiple scholarships through the university. I do always recommend external sources for scholarships. So these are those scholarships that you'll write the 2-page paper on why you love the American flag, right? It's a $500 scholarship. How long is that going to take? An hour? 2? $250 an hour is not a bad paycheck. Now, are you going to get it? Maybe not. But what I encourage students to do, and it's probably a little late for your students, but that summer before senior year, fastweb.org, scholarships.com are both external third-party scholarship search sites that are free to use, and students can find scholarship opportunities. And yeah, it's a pain in the butt to write that 2-page paper, but it might be a $500 scholarship. They require the essay, so they're dealing with 70 applicants instead of 7,000 applicants. It's amazing what students will do to avoid having to write an essay. Amazing. So encourage them to do that, because getting $4, $5, $6, $300, $500 scholarships can really add up and take a considerable chunk out of the loan balance. That is one other thing I did want to mention about loans. With the PLUS loans, with the direct, and with the subsidized and unsubsidized student loans, students are not obliged to take out those loans. So if there's another funding source, if grandpa is going to help pay for college or something, do not accept loans. You're not obliged to. You can decline any awards that you don't want to accept. And many times we will award far more than what a family or student needs to take out to cover their college costs. And that's when I know my friends can probably agree. It's kind of you go crazy at Best Buy at the start of the semester day. Yeah, so they get all this money at the beginning, and so be careful with that. Don't only allow them to take out what's truly required to pay for those direct costs, and then make them get a job. And my recommendation, I know a lot of parents say, oh no, I want my students to focus on studying, right? Yeah, it's extremely important. But students are in college 1/3 the amount of time that they're in class in high school. Having a job for 15 hours a week provides a little bit of structure. I know when I was an undergrad, I wasn't going to miss work because, by gosh, that $15 check was going to matter whether I ate at the end of the week or not. So I do encourage students to try to get a job on campus, because it does provide a little additional structure. But scholarships come from multiple sources. There is the institutional scholarships, UNTs at unt.academicworks.com. So by filling out that one scholarship, we're determining a student's eligibility for 350 university-wide scholarships. Again, colleges typically make their scholarships easy to apply for. One application, you're considered for everything. But then finding out whether they stack or don't stack can determine how many of those you might get. Organizations, does Argyle ISD have a scholarship fund or application process?
We have several local scholarships, and they usually come available March. Yeah.
So definitely check back with the counseling office for those Argyle ISD scholarship opportunities. Work with your employers, your houses of worship, any nonprofit organizations you might be members of, because those are the awards. Those local awards usually have much smaller applicant pools, so the likelihood of getting those scholarships are much higher than what you might find on the national search sites like FAFSA.org. But spend some time looking for these scholarships, because every scholarship dollar you get is one less loan dollar you're going to have to accept.
One thing to keep in mind, folks, be checking the counseling webpage. We have a separate section for scholarships, and we post things as they come in. And right now, CoServe is accepting applications for a $5,000 scholarship if you receive electricity from CoServe. That's on the website, so check that out if you're a CoServe customer. That's a pretty good scholarship.
What are they going to give you if you didn't have electricity in February? So, well, one thing I would, with organizations, one special scholarship that's available at a number of different Texas institutions I always feel compelled to talk about is the Terry Foundation Scholarship. Has anyone heard of the Terry Foundation Scholarship? So Terry Foundation is a third-party nonprofit organization that's devoted to kind of creating the next generation of leaders in Texas. So they have partnered with a number of Texas large public institutions where basically students apply to the Terry Foundation through our scholarship department. We create a candidate list that we submit to the Terry Foundation, and I think last year UNT was awarded something like 50 Terry Foundation scholarships.
Spell Terry?
Terry. And these scholarships are full room, board, tuition fees, stipend for 4 years. So it is such a great scholarship. I even tell students, if you do receive the Terry scholarship, decline everything else, because Terry will only decrease your award based upon other scholarships you get, so you don't get extra money. So decline everything else. That'll go to other eligible students. But that's one of those kind of weird hybrid scholarships, but is available at a number of Texas institutions and is a Cadillac scholarship program. So from here, where do you go? Obtain and review admissions and financial aid website materials for the schools which you're applying. Set up a little online folder to where you bookmark their website so you know where to go to, when to apply, how to apply, who to contact if you have questions, things of that nature. Don't beat all application deadlines. Don't try to meet them. It's going to inevitably cause trouble, and if there's any problems, that might take you out of consideration for life. Investigate other sources of aid. Connect with the admissions officers and financial aid officers at the target institutions. Again, carry scholarships, departmental scholarships, which are not offered by the university, but by the specific degree program or college the student is at. They may have funding that they give out. I know often at our university that departmental funding is maintained for continuing students, but there may be some new student options. That's it. So I hope you at least know a little bit more about the financial aid process. One of the really helpful pieces that we have for you tonight is the Fafsa on the web worksheet. So this is basically a worksheet that you can take home this week, start filling it out. If you have questions, you may want to reach out to your CPAs or tax attorneys to get some of these questions answered. They may be able to assist because a lot of the information we can't help with. But work on that worksheet, come up to one of the events with the Go Force students, see if we can help get through that financial aid process. But yeah, it doesn't take too long. How long would you say, 30, 40 minutes?
So like, adding to the Fafsa application, it doesn't take, cause like before, like when we first like did our application, we had to like enter the numbers manually. But recently, like in the last 2 years, that they can like retrieve the data like from your IRS. So it should not take more than 30 minutes. And then if you feel like, oh, that there's more information that you don't know at this moment, so it's not like you have to finish the whole application in one sitting. So you can always come back and do it. It's gonna save. So you have to create a save key at the beginning of your application. So every time like you log off and come back, and you just like put the save key, and then it will pick up where you left. So you don't have to do it at the same time. You can just come back later if you like to finish it. And it should not take more than 30 minutes. It's pretty straightforward, and then it already retrieve all the data from IRS, so it's pretty good.
It's easier than doing your 1040.
Yeah. I remember I used to do it manually, so.
And you said the TAFSA is only for if you're not a citizen of the United States?
Not citizen, permanent resident, right? Because you're already considered through the FAFSA for those awards.
Okay.
So my contact information, in case you do have any questions, please let me know. I will request, if any of your students are considering North Texas, or you just thought I did a good job, please scan this, leave your contact information. If you're not interested in UNT, once you get that email, you can unsubscribe. But I want to make sure my boss knows I do a good job, and if that helps me prove that. So certainly appreciate that. But if you do have any other questions, we can.
I think there's one in the back.
Yes.
I just have one question. So I understand the advantages of a subsidized, federal loan, but when it comes to unsubsidized versus a private student loan, the private student loan market is much cheaper. It's like 1% to 1.25%, maybe 1.5%. Is the case with SoFi, Earnest. There's a whole bunch. So what is the advantage? Why would the student, if they don't qualify for subsidized, why would they look at an unsubsidized federal loan versus
May well not be. Again, you're able to decline any award offered, and in some instances, it may make a lot more sense to decline the award.
I got you.
Is it something we should do before October 1st?
The Fsa Id have that logged in, and then that worksheet. By filling out that worksheet, it will make entry into the FAFSA extremely easy.
Is your presentation available?
I forwarded it to.
Yes, that presentation will be on our website, and then I've also had a recording, and so hopefully I'll have a YouTube link that whoever wasn't here, or y'all can go back and listen to it as well.
And then also, don't lose your Fsa IDs. If you forget your password, or if you somehow you forget it, it might take weeks to recover that.
And you'll need it every year.
I can tell that from a fact. Because one time, like, I forgot my password, and then I called them, and then, like, it takes, like, 2 weeks for them to fix it. So every time, just like write it somewhere, make it a note, do something, so then you don't forget, both the IDs.
And I think somebody asked us earlier, but to be clear, if we have multiple kids going to college in the very near future, we only need one parent of the ID, but we need 2 student IDs for each child.
Yes,
Yeah.
separate out.
One parent, 2
So each
children.
student has to have their own account, but if you're the same parent, it's just one for you, and that's it.
Okay,
You can do it for all the other kids that you have.
okay.
And then just real quick, because I'm gonna be our first time doing this, so if because we were only looking at a few local colleges, but you were talking about, he's looking at other ones further away. So if we're looking at that, we need to apply first, and make sure you can get in. And then we do the FAFSA, and what you're doing on the FAFSA, you don't have to do it one time for FAFSA, but then you just send it to each school, is that what?
Right, just like SAT or SAT scores.
So is it just, I was gonna say, so, well, okay, they'll have a.
So basically, like, you will be adding up to 10 schools at a time. So like schools that you want your FAFSA to send it to, you just add, like, at a very, like,
Is it the same as the ACT where we have the codes to send them, like for the
Easy.
codes?
There's different codes, but yeah.
Okay.
Because like, if you search up the schools, it will have like a code.
But it won't, if you're considering a school, but you haven't even applied yet, you don't wanna send that first, right?
You can, but they will likely
They
do
won't
nothing
even
with
give
it.
an idea, okay.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
If you are awarded federal aid, but you also have the GI Bill, is it one or the other, or can you utilize them?
I think it depends upon the GI Bill and if it's being used for like savings. That's a very different area. Most schools will have a student veteran services office that will work with families in determining how to access those awards and have them applied to what makes the most sense. But yeah, that income could impact aid for subsequent years too, so.
Sure, okay.
Any other questions, guys?
And I want to add one thing to a grant that we talked about earlier, the TOG grant, the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant, right? So if you, for example, if you have been to a community college and then you are receiving that grant, right? And then if you transfer to a university, sometimes like they don't give you that grant, but remember that that grant is renewable. If you transfer to a university, like you get more grant than you used to get in a community college. But you have to let them know that you used to receive that grant and show them like a paper that you were receiving